Our guest this week is a chart-topping country star, Grand Ole Opry member, ACM Award winner, and one of the best male voices of the 90s and 2000s. It is an honor and privilege of mine to be able to welcome Mark Wills to the Honky Tonk Time Machine. Mark, welcome, brother.
Glenn, how are you, buddy?
I'm doing fantastic, and even better that I get to talk to you. This has been a long time coming. I'm so glad we get to do this, and a special treat for you. You're our Easter weekend episode.
Nice. Well, we're looking forward to. We typically don't work a lot on these weekends, so when this came in, it was like, yeah, let's go take the boys out, play a little music.
Absolutely, and you're coming to Century Casino and Hotel Cape Girardeau. That's coming up on May the 3rd. So I know you're excited to get out our way.
Yes, sir. You know, we've been in that area before. It's been a while, but Missouri's always been good to us. We've had a bunch of great shows out there throughout my 29-year career. So looking forward to getting back out that way and playing some music for the fans out at the casino. It's going to be a good time.
I want to ask you a little bit more about the show, of course, but with this being an Easter weekend and you being from the South, I would imagine you grew up doing Easter right.
Well, man, you know, we did it right, and now we get to do it all over again because my wife and I we have two grandsons. We have a 2.5-year-old and I guess at this point he's about 11 weeks old. But we have had. Man, you know, our girls, you know, we raised our girls doing all the fun Easter stuff, going and getting a picture made with the Easter bunny and all that kind of stuff, and the egg hunt and all that. And then, you know, now we're sort of getting to continue that tradition with the boys. So it's pretty special.
That's awesome. Congrats on the grandkids, man. That's
Thank
cool.
you.
Is that a whole new world? You know, you were a parent, and now you get to do all the fun stuff.
You know, it's the benefit of maybe your wife doing something right, and me being gone all the time. Now that I get a second chance at being a fun grandpa for these little boys, it's a good time, man. I ain't gonna lie to you.
Absolutely. So I mentioned you're from the South. You grew up in Georgia, right?
Yes, sir. Born and raised up in a little town in North Georgia called Blue Ridge, and. You know, my wife and I, we've called Atlanta home for quite a while. You know, bounce back and forth between there and Nashville, and you know, just try to keep roots close to home with with the kids, with our families, my parents, Kelly's mom. You know, just all that kind of stuff. Trying to stay connected to family down here in Atlanta while trying to work out of Nashville.
I read this about you. I read that in your youth, your influences were more kind of on the rock and roll side. Is that true? Is that accurate?
Man, you know, it is, but, you know, people have to understand. I mean, I always grew up listening to country, but my first bands, when I was starting out, at 12, 13 years old, it's hard to find guys that wanted to play Alabama and Conway, that were my age. You know, we started out playing, I say big hair, heavy metal. Heavy metal is a very loose term. More of the pop rock, like, the Bon Jovi and Poison and stuff like that. That seemed to be the big music of the day. And and so that was our first couple bands, that we played in.
And that day, garage bands were pretty big, right? I mean, is that kind of the stuff you're talking about?
Absolutely. I mean, like I said, as a 12, 13, 14-year-old, it's hard to find somebody that wanted to play, good old Vern Gosdin and Keith Whitley and stuff like that. So I was playing drums. I had to play what I could. And, but at the same time, saying all that, made a lot of great memories from my youth getting to do that.
Man, you mentioned Vern Gosdin. He's a guy that I'm a little younger than you, so I wasn't as big into his stuff in my youth, but I learned about him a little bit later and started listening to him. Man, that guy was amazing.
Oh, dude. I mean, there's the 80s and the 90s, in retrospect, when you look back at that version of country music, man, some of the greatest songs, some of those just absolute tearjerkers that, just kind of rip your heart out. And, and we're fortunate enough to have been raised kind of in that realm, where that was, the new stuff. I mean, literally, like, the biggest influences in my music career were Alabama and Millsap and, Conway and and that era of country music, and then getting to be a well-rounded kid, playing some of that rock and enjoying some of that kind of stuff. And I truly believe that's what made my my musical palette. That's what made it what it is. I mean, I can appreciate a lot of different kind of stuff, and I think that's where the music of today, I think that's where you kind of find a lot of these new acts that are out right now. Their musical palette's sort of the same way, but it came up with some of the 90s country, and at the same time some of the rap and some of that sort of stuff, and that's why their music sounds the way it does today.
Yeah, it's all cyclical for sure. And you talk about Ronnie Millsap, and how cool is it that came full circle, that you got to remake Prisoner of the Highway with him?
Got to remake Prisoner, got to host his birthday party at the Opry for him, got to do his podcast and be around him a lot over the last 25 years. I mean, it's been miraculous, to be perfectly honest with you.
You start counting all the number ones that he had. I mean, you start running out of fingers pretty quick. He had, I don't know, probably
you can
40.
move fingers and toes and have a friend join in with you. I think last count he had over 40 number ones.
I think he's third. I think it's George, Conway, and then him, if memory serves. So yeah,
I wouldn't doubt it. I mean, just a great string of awesome songs, and that's truly what I believe made country music so great. When you go back to the 40s and 50s, it was always the emphasis on the songs, writing great songs, performing great songs, and here we are. Here we are with in the 2020s, and we're looking back, and I think in today's world, so many people are looking back at it, and they love that 80s, that 90s, that early 2000s country. Just because it was great songs.
Yeah, I love that it's coming back, man. That's kind of the whole point of the show that we're doing right now. To talk more a little bit about you, I want to learn more about you a little bit, Mark. Is it accurate to say that Keith Stegall, the legendary producer, songwriter, is he the one who discovered you, I guess, if you will, for lack of a better term?
Well, Keith was a part of it. Carson Chamberlain was the guy who really, gave me my shot. Keith was more of the executive producer. He was kind of the lead guy over that department at Mercury. And Carson is the one that brought me in, and so it was Carson and Keith together.
Okay. So yeah, Carson kind of introduced you to Keith, and that kind of kicked it off from there.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. And then, Jacob's Ladder, the debut single from '96, such a great song to lead with. What do you remember about that time?
Well, I mean, during that time, I was a demo singer in Nashville. So I was the guy that that songwriters would call, or let me rephrase that. I was one of the guys that, songwriters would call to come in and sing their demos. And I actually sang the demo on that. Tony Martin, Cal and Brenda Sweat wrote that song and called me in to record the demo of it. And when I took it home, my manager at the time, he listened to it and he goes, "Man, that's a great song. It's a good up tempo, and we had always had, you look back at my career and you can see this. I mean, I always had a hard time finding good up tempo songs, and for whatever reason, and that became kind of the flagship around what we were thinking about making, the first record with, and and it was our first top 5 record.
I talked to Brian White about this, and I've talked to Skip Ewing about this. Those good up tempos really are hard to come by.
They're elusive.
Yeah, I don't know if easier is the right word, but it does seem like it's easier to find a ballad that you can pour your heart into.
I think country music has always been centered around telling great stories, and great stories are typically easier to tell when they are told from a ballad perspective.
That's a great way to put it, yeah. But that being said, Jacob's Ladder is a great story, and it's a story, it's kind of a tale as old as time. Who doesn't love a good forbidden love story? That story's been told, but that song really tells it in a uplifting, really country kind of way. That's what I've always loved about it.
Absolutely. I mean, it was one of those things where from the very first time I sang that song, the reaction was so good of people, and they were like, hey, was a positive, and and it's one of my favorite songs. We actually, a lot of times, we'll start the show with Jacob Slider. I kind of feel like, when we start the show, we start from the beginning and work our way through.
Well, that's good, because that's kind of what we do here on this show. The sophomore single, High, Low, and In Between, now it wasn't as successful. It was a hit. It was top 30 or so. But when you see that as an artist, that your sophomore single didn't quite get as high on the chart, does worry set in at all? And what's that like?
Man, it was too new. It was too new for me to worry about that kind of stuff. That was all of that sort of stuff was the record company's job. We all play our own part in the grand scheme of I go on the road and sing the songs and promote the songs. They pick the singles, and as a new artist, you don't have a lot of choice as to what when the record company comes back and says, we're going to put this out, you go, okay, and so I always viewed especially for the first couple records, I always viewed the first of the singles as the radio team, they knew better what was going to be, better to get played, easier to get played, and it was my job to go out and do the promotion and sing the songs live.
I think that's a great way to do it and a great way to look at it, and maybe not take that so personal and kind of separate it the way you just mentioned.
Well, you can't take it personal. I mean, when you go in, when you're putting something out on the radio and you're going into the Christmas freeze, or you've got another artist that's got a song that is, reminiscent or sounds sort of like what you've put out, and you're the new kid on the block, you're going to suffer the consequences, whether it's your fault or not. And so, what I always tried to do was, like I said, let the radio team do their job and I would do mine.
It's great advice for an artist that's making music now, because I'm seeing that a lot now, actually, Mark. I'm seeing a lot of artists' sophomore single just not quite, fit the bill that lead single did. It's happening a ton right now.
Well, I think a lot of what happens in today's world is these record companies, they put all their capital into one song. And and which is fine, which is great. But then when they try to follow it up, it can be difficult. And for somebody like myself, I don't really have to. I don't play that game anymore. I go out, we play the songs. We've got 2 new records that are ready to go. We're trying to find the right place to plug them in. And and there may be a time where we have to play that game again, but I have a lot more knowledge now than I did, in 1996, 1997, even 1998.
Well, speaking of 1997 and 1998, that's kind of where I was going to go next. Places I've Never Been did get you back in the top 5 on the charts. What do you remember about that one, Mark?
Oh, man, again, Tony Martin, great songwriting. Songs have always been one of those things that, that you can develop a sentimental attachment to. And, when you do that, you hope that it's successful. I just felt like Places I've Never Been was such a great 3-minute mental vacation. Just listen to the words of it. It kind of takes you down. It's a great melody, and it allowed you to just sort of, I don't know. I guess the word relax when you hear that song. It's just very soothing.
Yeah, I would agree. Somewhere in there between 97 and 98, you lost the mullet.
No, I lost the mullet. I lost the mullet right before the Places I've Never Been video.
Okay. Well, I was thinking, I just watched that. It was looking still a little long in the back, but not quite mullet level, I guess.
No, you gotta go back and check your eyes, because if you go back to the first video, High, Low, and In Between, son, it gave Billy Ray a run for his money, and then waking up on the bus day after day after day, trying to go into radio stations and keep that mop looking decent just wasn't fitting it any longer. And I woke up one day and told my wife, I said, cut my hair off. And she goes, I can't cut your hair off. And I was like, well, if you can, I'll find somebody that can. and went and got a haircut.
Well, times were changing, so.
Yep.
How big was 98 for you? I mean, you had 2 huge ballads. You got the ACM Top New Male Vocalist. That was a banner year for Mark Wills.
It was kind of the culmination of hard work paying off. We had set ourselves up to have some success, and it paid off. It was a great time. I Do was a huge song. Wish You Were Here was a huge song, and Don't Laugh at Me. And the funny thing about Don't Laugh at Me was that, the record company, they didn't want to put that song out. And I fought for that song. I was like, in a world where a lot of times the music is fluff and it's just feel good, it's just, have a good time. We had a song that Alan Shamblin and Steve Seskin wrote that dropped in our laps, and it was tremendous. I just felt like it was such a great song. I felt like the message of that song was going to be so huge. And to be perfectly honest with you, I feel vindicated because it is that song that in today's world, here we are, 2025, we look back at great songs, great music, and people still have a sentimental attachment to that song. It is that song that people just kind of claim as their life song. That's huge. That's huge for any artist to have a song that you feel like, 25, 26, 27, 28 years later, people are like, man, that's my favorite song.
And I feel like you could say the same thing for I Do for different reasons.
Yeah, a lot of people used I Do as their wedding song. It was a huge record as well. It was our first number one that we had. And it was, and it was one of those songs, I joke about it. It was used at a lot of people's weddings, and people come up and go, yeah, I danced at that to my first wedding. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, I hope it had nothing to do with the song. Don't blame it on the song that you've been married 4 times now.
For Don't Laugh at Me, by the way, I understand you got to recently record that with your daughter, re-record it.
I did. Went in, so the Home Free guys, they called me and they were like, hey man, we would love to do a version of one of your songs. And I said, well, what are you looking at? And they're like, well, you tell us, and they originally had said something about 19-something. And I was like, well, 19-something's a great song, but I think vocally, acoustic, Don't Laugh at Me could be huge. I just love the thought process of doing a vocal arrangement of that. And so they went in, and so I took my daughter when I went to the studio to record the lead vocal. My youngest daughter Macy went with me, and the producer of the track, he goes, can she sing? And I said, dude, she can sing like a bird. And he goes, well, do you want me to put her on the track? And I said, if you want to put her on the track, I said, that's up to you. I said, but I'm telling you right now, I'm going to leave. I'm going to leave the studio because, I'm going to let y'all do what you do. And he goes, okay. And I actually stepped out of the studio and wasn't in there when she recorded her part, and she killed it. Just absolutely killed it.
That's awesome. It's such a sense of pride because I got 2 daughters myself, so I can only imagine the pride you feel as a dad when you hear that.
Well, to be able to sort of reimagine something and to know that when that song came out, she wasn't even born. That song predates, I think that song predates my oldest daughter. So it was right there at the same time. Either way. So to have something that you can go in and reimagine and then throw your youngest daughter in on was pretty special.
I do want to ask you about Wish You Were Here real quick, because Skip Ewing was actually my last guest, so that was fresh in my mind. But Bill Anderson and Debbie Moore helped him write that song.
Yeah.
And he said it was Debbie's idea about the postcard from heaven, and then they just kind of all went to work together. But what's the artist's perspective from that song?
Oh, man. Well, that's living proof of how you can take a great song and not complete the painting. Okay, everybody thinks of songs as portraits, of something that completes a picture. And the beautiful thing about Wish You Were Here is that it wasn't so literal. People have always asked, when did he send the postcard? I don't know when he sent the postcard. You tell me. Was it something that he sent it from the airport? Was it something that, there's so many open-ended wonders about that song. And so, for me with that song, it kind of invoked a little bit of fear. I'm not going to lie to you, because I fly a lot of places. I go, I got 2 million miles on Delta alone, and and for me to kind of step back and be like, I'm not going to lie to you.
It's my favorite song of yours. I absolutely love that song. And I'd be remiss if I didn't obviously ask you about 19-something, because that one has gone down as your biggest hit, a 6-week Billboard #1, probably longer on some of the other charts.
Yeah, is actually, I think it was 7 on R&R. I think it was longer. But the ironic thing about that was that the second space shuttle disaster happened when that song was at #1.
That's wild.
And 19-something was still at #1 when the second shuttle, blew up, disintegrated on reentry. And when that happened, some of the stations decided to drop it, and when they dropped it, I had made a statement about it. I said, look, you can say what you want to, and if you're not comfortable playing it, I understand. But that line in that song was honoring the first shuttle disaster, and with it honoring the shuttle disaster, it's almost dishonoring to the second to drop the song. And sure enough, it went from #1 to #3, back to #1.
That's crazy. Just the coincidence of that happening again while that song's making a chart run is insane. So. Oh,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And it was probably the fastest rising song we'd ever had on the chart. It hung around. The crazy thing was that after the second shuttle disaster, it kind of had a resurgence,
Yeah.
It was kind of one of those songs like Only in America for Brooks and Dunn after 9/11.
Mm-hmm.
That song was dying on the chart, and 9/11 happened, and boom, it blows up, and it's a huge song for them. Kind of the same way for us. It was already a huge song for us, but just sort of took on another meaning.
Yeah, well, I remember how big that song was because I saw you play it at the Opry back in 2002 or so, and and you killed it. And I'm looking forward to seeing you again here coming up May 3rd, Century Casino Hotel Cape Girardeau. Just one last thing, what can fans expect when we come see you?
Man, they can expect the hits. We've been fortunate to have a lot of songs on the radio since 1996, and our show consists of pretty much every single one of them. So, we want folks to come out and hang out with us and enjoy a little trip down memory lane with some good old 90s and 2000s country.
Well, that's some of the best there is. Mark, thank you so much for your time. Happy Easter to you and your family, and we'll see you on May 3rd at Century Casino and Hotel Cape Girardeau.
All right, brother. Thank you.
All righty. Bye-bye.
See you, Glenn. Bye.